I made the mistake of searching the deep web one time. I saw on Reddit some people were talking about this thing called Tor that allows you to search the deep web, and it was basically a post asking for the strangest things people have come across on the deep web. It intrigued me, some of the things people have found, so I went along and downloaded Tor. Someone on Reddit posted a link to a basically hidden wiki with a bunch of useful links to the dark web. I was shocked at how many child pornography links there were. I did my best to steer clear of anything like that. I did come across a link that took me to another page with a bunch of links, called the Black Pages. The page was black with a bunch of red and yellow links. The red pages seemed to be the strangest. There was one link called Personal Assassin, and another called Dead Pets. Reading some of those links, I realized how messed up this whole deep web thing really was. I clicked a yellow link and ended up at yet another page full of links. There, I found something that seemed interesting. It was called the Secret Society chat. I clicked on the link, and it took even longer than all the other pages took to load. I'd say I stared at a blank white screen for a good minute before the page finally turned black and a chat box popped up. Next to the chat box was a black video screen. I wish that I had just clicked the back button at that point, but instead I typed "hey" in the chat box. What happened next was weird. Someone wearing a mask sitting in a dark room popped up on the screen. I felt like my heart stopped when I saw my face pop up on the screen as well. The website was using my webcam even though I naturally keep it off. I covered it with my thumb and tried to close the page, but at this point my taskbar was gone, along with the minimize and exit buttons at the top of the Tor window. I tried hitting Ctrl-Alt-Delete, but it did nothing. And then there was a muffled, distorted voice coming from my speakers. I could only assume it was the guy in the mask speaking. He was masking his voice with some kind of voice changer. I clearly remember, he said,
"I still see you, James."
My heart sank. He had said my name. I began holding the power button on my laptop, and it felt like an eternity before it finally cut power. I didn't know if I should report what happened to the police, but from what I knew, everything was anonymous with Tor, so it didn't even seem worth it. It was obviously just a low-life hacker. I went on with my life after deleting the Tor browser from my computer, but about 2 weeks later, my mom threw a letter in my room. She told me it came in the mail for me. There was no return address on it. I ripped the letter open and unfolded the paper tucked inside. In huge letters that filled the paper were the 3 words, "Don't come back." I felt like I was going to throw up from the sickening feeling it gave me. I crumpled up the paper and threw it away. I didn't call the cops as it seemed pointless, and I didn't tell my mom because it would only cause her to panic. But I have no idea how or why they got my address. My worst experience on Tor was stumbling upon a horrific, sickening page called Human Experiments. I don't remember where exactly I found it. It was buried deep somewhere in a link archive page. The homepage described the content on the site. I was distraught at what I was reading. It said in a red, bloody font, "The experiments conducted for this website are to prove that not all humans are born equal. The people chosen to be experimented on were usually homeless, but also the unfortunate souls that happen to get caught by these sick fucks. These so-called experiments ranged from starvation and water restriction, reactions to extreme pain and torture, infections and diseases, and even infant tolerances to x-rays, pain, and heat." I had seen all those horrific shock videos like 3 Guys, 1 Hammer, so I thought I would be prepared for what I was going to see. But I wasn't. I made the mistake of clicking on the first link to the experiment photos. I honestly had to retain the urge to puke. I don't want to even give a description of what I saw, but I'll just say, there were innocent victims, people just like you and I, going through horrible, horrible things that nobody should ever go through. Against my better judgment, I scrolled the entire page, and it only got worse. Pretty soon a whole section dedicated to infants and toddlers came up. I had somehow made it to the bottom of the page, and then a little box popped up on the screen. I didn't know what it was until a line of text popped up. The text said, "Did you enjoy the site?" I realized it was a chat box. I typed, "Who is this?" The stranger promptly replied, evading my question by saying, "What was your favorite part of the site?" I asked the same question again. This time he actually acknowledged my question and told me he was the site owner. I told him that this was sick and inhumane and that I would report this site immediately. That was my biggest mistake, telling him that, because after a short pause, he finally said, I see your name is Michael, and you live in Massachusetts." He was right. But instead of clicking out of that browser right away, I typed in, "No, you're wrong." About 10 seconds later, he typed something that made my heart feel like it shriveled up, and that was my address, my complete, correct home address. His final words were, "Have a nice day." I closed the browser and slammed my laptop shut. I called the police first thing before even telling my parents. When the cops got to our house, I explained everything to everyone at once. They wanted to see my computer since I didn't remember the link to the website. Unfortunately, the Tor browser doesn't save your browsing history, so I couldn't even help them in shutting down this website. The cops told us that if what I said was true, that we should find another place to stay as soon as possible. Thankfully, this was around the time that we were looking to move away anyway. I couldn't believe how fast my parents were able to sell the house and find another. I apologized to them every day for a month after this happened. I hated to have to make them go through this all. I liked to think the guy in the chat was just bluffing, but I couldn't take the chance. I don't think anybody should ever look into the deep web, as there is no good to come of it. There used to be a website on the dark web called the Silk Road. It was an underground illegal drug marketplace. I had heard about it through friends that had used it. Our weed dealer was moving out of state and he was our only connection, so my friends started using this website and claimed that it was legit. The timing couldn't be better to score some pot since my parents were in Atlantic City for the weekend. I downloaded the Tor browser and checked it out. The biggest seller on the site was cannabis, of course. I left a comment on one of the newer listings asking for anybody to tell me if the listing was legit. I came back to the site about an hour later and I had one new message. It was from a user named Illy B. He saw my comment and offered to sell me an ounce for a really low price, but he only does local. I've done local deals before and I've never really had a problem with them, so I told him that I was in Washington. Turned out he lived only about an hour away from me. I suggested we meet halfway, but shockingly, he said he would just meet me in my hometown. I couldn't turn down that offer. He said he would be over after work around 9 o'clock. I told him to meet me in the Wendy's parking lot. He asked me a bunch of weird questions like my address, who I live with. I definitely didn't want to give my address to a pot dealer, and I lied and told him I lived alone. A little bit later, he texted me telling me he found a much better place to do the deal. It was behind an old closed-down retail store at the edge of town. My sketchiness alarm was going off, but I was so desperate to get that grass. I knew exactly where that building was, so I drove over and got there within 5 minutes. I parked the car behind the building, but couldn't see anyone else there. Then I got a text saying he was on his way. That made no sense, because if he lived an hour away, how would he know of this place? I sat there for like 20 minutes trying to get another response from him, but he never answered. I decided to just give it up. I had a feeling something sketchy was going on and that I should just leave while I still could. It took me 10 minutes to get back home. My front door was open. I knew I had shut it, so I was worried that my parents had gotten home early. I parked my car in the driveway since my dad didn't take it and went back inside. The light upstairs in my parents' bedroom was on, and I heard some kind of shuffling noise. I shouted "Mom" and "Dad," and the noises stopped. The door to the room slammed shut, and I knew something was wrong. My dad's car wasn't even in sight, and now he's not answering. It took me long enough to realize that whoever was in there wasn't either one of my parents. Since I'm a straight up idiot, I grabbed a carving knife from the kitchen and charged upstairs to my parents' room. I practically almost broke down the door after slamming it open. I didn't see anyone, but I right away picked up on the fact that my mom's jewelry case was opened. I grabbed the phone in my parents' room and called 911, but something grabbed me from under the bed. I used the knife in my hand to stab their arm, and the man under the bed began to scream in agony. Since it was a corded phone, I couldn't leave the room with it. All I had time to tell the police was that someone broke into my house, and then gave them my address. The man crawled out from under the bed with the knife still in his arm. He didn't even look at me, he just ran straight for the front door into his car. The best I could describe him was that he was a black man with a backwards hat and raggy clothing, and he drove a black Honda Accord. Of course, I couldn't tell the police much. I couldn't bring up the website, as it was illegal to use it. All I could do was describe him to the best of my ability. So he's still out there home free. I can only guess he got my address by hacking me somehow.